Hey everybody, today we're going to learn about John Brown. He's the hero who started the Civil War. Who's John Brown? May 9th, 1800 to December 2nd, 1859. John Brown was an American abolitionist. He swore to the Lord above that he'd abolish slavery or die trying. He believed this was his sacred obligation and a natural Christian thing to do. Bleeding Kansas. John Brown moved to Kansas in response to Bleeding Kansas, which was many violent confrontations between pro-slavery and anti-slavery teams. John Brown was asked by his sons to come down to aid them in the cause, and John Brown was more than willing. Harpers Ferry. In October 1859, John Brown led men in an attack on an armory in Harpers Ferry, Virginia. Him and his men killed 10 to 11 men, first in Bleeding Kansas, Pottawatomie Creek Massacre. I have a hard time saying that name. And then the raid on Harpers Ferry. Christianity and the evils of slavery. I believe God gave John Brown his opportunity to begin the Civil War. And although he's not the only reason it took place, he was the one that knew it was necessary to end the evils of slavery. Christians aren't always willing to do the dirty work, but some bad things end up being necessary to put an end to evil taking place in front of us. For example, in this instance, is slavery. John Brown the Patriarch. John Brown is an example of who a father ought to be. Loving, kind, and gentle, but oftentimes when punishing, he was perhaps too hard on his family. But it's better to be harder on your children than too easy. He's been seen as a figure like an Old Testament patriarch, like Abraham. John had many children, 20 to be exact. And this is important because I believe Christians ought to have as many kids as they possibly can have, so long as they're willing to teach them good morals and be there for their children. John Brown's anti-slavery relations. John Brown had many abolitionist relations, the most famous of which being to Frederick Douglass. He helped people in the Underground Railroad and kept fugitives in his home. John Brown, that is, not Frederick Douglass, although I think he did the same. He did the Lord's work in an active way, in a time when even saying the wrong thing could get you killed. John Brown's pledge. At a memorial service in Hudson, Brown rose from his seat and raising his right hand, issued a vow. Here before God, in the presence of these witnesses, I consecrate my life to the destruction of slavery. But it would be years before Brown could honor his pledge. Brown's death. John Brown was hanged in front of a crowd in Charlestown, Virginia. It's now West Virginia. On December 2nd, 1859. John Brown believed life was a moral test, and that he was predestined to free the slaves of the United States. He was right in that life is a moral test, and I believe God used him to free the slaves as well. The last written words of John Brown. I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood. I had, as I now think vainly, flattered myself that without much bloodshed, it might be done. He was right, sadly enough. This here's a picture of John Brown kissing African-American baby. Apparently, he'd done so right after his trial, according to witnesses. He really was somebody that viewed everybody the same, and he was unique for the time, even for abolitionists. I think that a lot of Christians would do good to model who they are and what they're like after the zeal of John Brown. Because although he was an extremist, he really did set out to do what he did and ended up getting the desired result he wanted. He really pushed the abolitionists around him to do more for the cause. And slavery was a moral evil in front of them. And I think that he did the right thing. Although some of the consequences were very extreme. They weren't necessarily his fault, although they were done for the same reason that he did what he did. So in the end, I think that you should hold strongly to your beliefs. You should have as many children as you can manage to have and teach them as well as you can. And you should fight for people who need you to fight for them. And that's all I have for you today. Have a good rest of your day.